Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2022 Candidates Forum for the 36th Legislative District. This is an event proudly co-sponsored by the Queen Anne and Magnolia Community Councils. My name is Stephanie Ballard, and I am happy to be your novice moderator this evening. In this largely remote world, I am streaming from my basement. And while my family has promised to be as quiet as possible, I do have a 1-year-old with no respect for authority. So I will mute as much as possible. With us this evening, I'd like to present our candidates. We have Tyler Crone, Julia Reed, Jeff Manson, Nicole Gomez, and soon Waylon Robert. Just to give you a brief idea of what you can expect, in order to get our questions out this evening, we are foregoing with the usual introductions and jumping right into our questions. Our traditional format is lightning round. So we are going to be offering each candidate 90 seconds to provide their response. You'll look for the name Josh Daniel. He's up in my top left-hand corner waving. He is going to be our timekeeper this evening. So he'll give you a few seconds warning, about 15 seconds before your time is up. So that'll allow you time to finish your thought. The questions are going to be split into 2 different sections. The first 5 questions will be directed to only 3 of the candidates who have been randomly selected to respond. The final 2 questions will be given to each candidate, so everyone will have a chance to respond to those final 2 questions. And if time is permitting, there may be questions added on, but we'll play that by ear. So without any further ado, if everyone is ready, we'll get right into it. David, do we have, is Waylon here yet? No?
I'm watching, but no, he's not arrived yet.
Okay, well, we'll start with question 1. The first question is, what is your plan for meeting the state's obligation to provide a high quality education for all students? This question will be directed to Tyler Crone first, Jeff Manson second, and Julia Reed third. Tyler, whenever you're ready.
Thank you all. Hi, I'm Tyler, and I've been a Seattle public school parent since 2008. My children currently are at the center school, a sophomore and a 3rd grader at Coe Elementary. And it is from this experience that I know that our schools are in trouble. We see dropping enrollment in our schools already because of how we funded them, lurched from funding cliff to funding cliff. There is a particular moment in which our schools right now need a cheerleader. When I've talked to PTAs, principals, parents, teachers across our district, they want full funding now. They want to see a focus on inclusive education, serving our students with special needs and disabilities, and are concerned that those children and students are being left behind. There is also an intense focus and need and desire right now for more attention to mental health. It is a concern for me as a parent and is a concern from other parents I talk to. The way that I'm going to achieve this is by 1, being a champion and being relentless, 2, working to close corporate loopholes, 3, thinking about it's time for an income tax so that we become the least, not the most regressive state in this country in terms of how we have income. And I have education and reimagining our schools at the center of my platform, and one of the reasons why I'm in this race as a mom and as a parent, and I thank you all for this chance to speak to it.
Thank you very much. The same question goes to Jeff Manson. Please let me know if you need me to repeat it.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Manson. Thank you, Stephanie and David. And I see some familiar faces and names, including a few people I think have knocked on your door. So I'm glad to be here. So a few years ago, our state Supreme Court said that we had finally met our constitutional minimum for funding public education. And I don't think we should pat ourselves on the back for meeting a constitutional minimum. I think we're still very far from the state providing full funding of public education. And the lack of full funding requires school districts to rely on levies or PTAs and volunteers and private donations in order to have basic services provided to our kids, and it creates a real equity issue. So I think the state itself really needs, it has the burden, it has the constitutional duty to fully fund education, and it needs to step up to the plate. This last legislative session, we did get some additional funding, COLA for teachers, and also some more funding for counselors, nurses, and some other staff positions, which is good, but I think it's just a first step in the right direction. Our state constitution says that it's a paramount duty of the state for a good reason, that we have to be able to educate our children, first because it's the morally right thing to do, but also they're the economy of the future and the citizens of the future. So we need to increase funding more, and I agree with Tyler, we need to do that with progressive revenue sources.
Thank you very much. The same question goes to our last candidate, Julia Reed.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this question. I'm Julia. If you didn't hear, I'm coming to you from my car because the bridge was up, so I didn't quite make it home. But I love this question because, you know, I'm many things. I'm a workforce policy expert, an advocate for youth and racial justice, a lifelong Seattleite, but what I am most of all is a teacher's kid. I grew up here in Seattle. My dad was a longtime teacher at Washington Middle School, Cleveland High School. My mom was a pediatric occupational therapist working in the Shoreline and Edmond schools. And my parents inspired me to pursue a career in public service, and their union jobs made it possible for me to go to Smith and work in the Obama administration and pursue other key parts of my career. I think one of the things that we most need in our school system especially is a renewed investment in workforce development and career and technical education, and pathways to help young people connect to work after school while they're still in school. I talk to so many teachers in my job. I work for a consulting firm that helps cities and states build youth apprenticeship programs, who are just talking about how students are checking out. They don't want to, they're not coming back to school. They're not continuing their education. They're not continuing on to college. We have some of the most generous college grant aid of any state in the nation and some of the lowest rates of college going. And I think we need to be thinking about how are we helping young people re-engage in school? And a critical part of that is increasing their access to hands-on learning. So as someone who's worked in workforce development, youth apprenticeship development for a lot of my career, that's something that I really want to invest in when it comes to thinking about fully funding our schools. And also as a daughter of a special educator, investing in our special education systems is critical. I think what allows us to do that is, oops, sorry.
Thank you. And Julia, I'm not sure if you have an extra, you may be challenged, I guess, with if you're using a phone or something to be able to call in. So I'm not sure if you're able to see Josh when he pops up. I don't know.
Oh, I see him. I saw him when he popped up, and I heard him when he said.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
turning on my camera at about 15 seconds. So when I come on, you got about 15 seconds to go.
Super. Thanks. That's helpful to know. Thanks, Josh.
Perfect. Our second question will be going to the following candidates. Waylon Robert. Is Mr. Robert with us? Oh, yes. Hello. Waylon Robert.
Thank you.
Then to Nicole Gomez, and then Tyler Crone. The question is as follows, and there was a suggestion made that I pop the questions into the chat so that everyone can see them. I've put the first one in. I'm not such a fast typer, so I'll get the second one in as soon as I read it. But the second question is, what's your vision for the ideal tax and revenue structure for Washington State? Each candidate gets 90 seconds to respond. Waylon Robert.
Yeah, please excuse any boisterous sounds. I'm broadcasting live from Pacific Fishermen Shipyard in Ballard. But I think it's critical, one, that we have a tax structure that works for working families, and that's middle-class families in our district. And so to me, that means that I would support an income tax. I do support the capital gains tax. However, I think that we need to lower our sales and property taxes, because I've been talking to too many folks on the doors. They're worried about how long they can stay in their homes by their property taxes rising by 30%. I'm honored to be endorsed by King County Assessor John Arthur Wilson, and I want to work with him in Olympia to have progressive property taxation so folks can stay in their homes for every part of their life.
Thank you very much. The next candidate to speak on this question will be Nicole Gomez, when you're ready.
Great. Hi, everyone. I love this question because talking taxes is one of my favorite things to do. Essentially, the tax that I would support, I would also support an income tax if that were to come before us. And then as well as a tax on excess of wealth. And Representative Frame has introduced that bill in this couple of sessions now, and it finally got a hearing this last session, and so I think people are learning about it and how it works. And essentially that would be a 1% tax on the value of like they said, 1% on the value of the financial intangibles like stocks and bonds, but those are equal over $1 billion, which is actually only affects a certain number of folks in our state. The interesting thing about that particular tax is that it actually asks the wealthy to pay their fair share, which they aren't currently doing. And so making sure that we're able to accomplish that is something that I am committed to. As well as any other things that would guarantee getting more money into the pockets of working people. Thank you.
Thank you. The last candidate to speak on this question will be Tyler Crone, whenever you're ready.
Thank you all so much. And thank you so much for the question. I am alarmed and concerned as I turned on the news this morning, and with the inflation as it is, a family now spends $347 more per month. The moment of inflation is impacting all of us, whatever our socioeconomic status is, but is particularly impacting working families and working people. My vision for an ideal tax and revenue structure in our state would be an income tax. I know that there have been years when I have paid my taxes and been aghast as a self-employed individual about how much more I pay than, for example, a Bill Gates. I see an avenue and have been listening to and learning from Reuven Carlisle about how we can bring in the revenue we need to fund our obligations, such as our first question, excellent public schools and the services and the safety nets that are most vulnerable among us. So my vision is to have an income tax, to close corporate loopholes, and to continue to learn from those who have been thinking about this for a very long time, and to have conversation around a table with diverse perspectives. The one piece that I wanted to share is that alarm around property taxes that a single mom friend I know in Magnolia is about to be forced out of her house because property taxes are now more than her mortgage. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our third question. The candidates speaking on this question will be Jeff Manson, Julia Reed, and Waylon Robert. 90 seconds each. The question is, what are your priorities for infrastructure in Washington State and the 36th District? First to speak, Jeff Manson.
All right, well, in the 36th district, first I'd be remiss if I don't first mention the Magnolia Bridge. A small, not even large earthquake will take that down, and we need to replace it with something similar or exactly what we have there right now. Generally speaking, though, I believe we need more funding for transit. I'm excited that light rail is coming through our district in the coming decades, but the fact that it's in the coming decades and not the coming years years is the part that is more disappointing. I think we need to make sure that we're supporting sound transit and making sure the alignments are right, that we're doing it right. I believe we need a tunnel under the Ship Canal to Ballard. But if we need more funding to do it the right way, then we need to find that funding. I think we also, speaking of our bridges, the Ballard Bridge is a particularly old bridge and also will need to be replaced or fixed in the coming years. So I think those are the most emergent issues for the 36th district. But generally speaking, we need more funding for transit and pedestrian and bike infrastructure, as well as maintaining our existing road and bridge infrastructure.
I remember that.
Thank you. The next candidate to speak will be Julia Reed. Same question.
Thank you. Well, though I'm coming to you from my car today because I needed to more quickly transition between events, usually you can see me out and about in the district on my electric bike. I'm really passionate about bringing zero carbon transportation solutions to our streets, to our cities. I think it's essential, especially in a city like ours. But I think that that has to work in tandem with our critical infrastructure pieces. Replacing the Magnolia Bridge, replacing the Ballard Bridge are going to be essential, but I don't want to just see them replaced. I want to see them built better. It's scary to be a pedestrian on the Ballard Bridge or to be a bike rider on the Ballard Bridge or to ride or to be a bus rider on those transportation links. We need not just to think about what we're doing now, but how could we be doing things better in the future? I love that Jeff brought up Sound Transit. I worked on as the city's representative to Sound Transit, both the board and the Sound Transit planning team early on in planning the alignments for Ballard and West Seattle and fighting for the needs of the city. I often got the feeling that Sound Transit would prefer it if they could just lay down their lines and they didn't have to deal with pesky things like people and buildings and areas. And that was so frustrating. And I know what it means to push back against that and say that we need to hold the line for this is a once in a lifetime building opportunity that's going to serve us all. And I think folks who came to the Queen Anne Community Council meeting where we talked about all kinds of different about the Sound Transit alignments and folks' interest in everything from gondolas to circulator buses, that we need to be thinking about how are we bringing people to the lines, not just building the lines. This isn't just putting down lines on a map. This is going to fundamentally transform our city for the next 100 years. So we need to get it right.
Thank you. Last candidate to speak on the third question will be Waylon Robert, whenever you're ready.
So one is the Magnolia Bridge. I think it needs to stay where it is. If we move the Magnolia Bridge, it's going to take 12 minutes longer for an ambulance to get off the hill. We're going to need state, federal, county, and city cooperation around that. And I'll be a champion on the budget. I know right now we're only 30% through design, and that's unacceptable. I think it's critical that we maintain our existing infrastructure. I was talking to a neighbor in Blue Ridge yesterday that their tire blew because they hit a pothole. I think third, we're going to need more investments for freight mobility. Our city's tax base, 30% of it is maritime and industrial. So it's critical that we invest in our freight corridors and have people on staff that are familiar with freight transit. In conclusion, I'd say too that all this comes back to revenue, and often the public works fund is being robbed to fund other critical services like mental health and drug treatment. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to need more revenue. I'm hearing too on the doors that some people feel unsafe going downtown. So I'd like to see more social workers and public safety officers riding the bus, because we've seen bus transportation ridership drop by about 50%. So it's critical people feel safe sending their kids or just themselves riding the bus.
Thanks very much. Moving to question 4. Question 4 will be directed to Nicole Gomez, Tyler Crone, Jeff Manson. And just to let you know, each candidate is getting an opportunity to speak on 3 of these questions. So there's an even distribution in terms of our first set of lightning round questions. So question 4 is, what role should the state play in dealing with substance abuse And do you see this as a policy priority? First to speak will be Nicole Gomez, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much for that question. So the state's role in substance abuse, and I work in healthcare quite a bit. So for me, I look at it through a healthcare lens and through a mental health care lens. We want to make sure that we are funding those programs that need to be funded so that people can get the help that they need. The mental health care right now, we need to add additional funding for mental health care workers. We need apprenticeship programs, or not apprenticeship, sorry. We need additional programs that are allowing for more people to pursue that as a career option. Those are things that are needed right now because so many people over the course of the pandemic either have retired or left those careers. And so that's where I see the role of the state being able to do that. We did have some good funding put into place over the past 2 years. And right now at UW, they're building a new hospital, which has new beds. And so, as soon as we start getting those people, people who are experiencing this problem additional help, that's how we're going to be able to start addressing the issue that's underlying. Thank you. I see that Josh popped up.
Thanks very much. It's effective. Next to speak on this question will be Tyler Crone.
Thank you all so much for asking this question. The crisis we're facing around substance use is a top concern for me, and it is a top priority. I think that the state has a critical role, and this is top of mind for neighbors, for parents, thinking about the most vulnerable amongst us, our unsheltered neighbors. But the concerns I'm hearing most are really the substance use crisis amongst our teens. And there's a grave concern for parents. So what would I do about it? My background and training is in public health. I've worked extensively in the HIV response, and from that experience of the HIV response and the public health background is to take a harm reduction approach. So one, use a public health framework, invest in harm reduction. And what does this mean? Again, it means creating this, investing in the services that our young people need when they are struggling with addiction. It means investing in the services and supports that the most vulnerable amongst us need. There's just nowhere, when I have these conversations, I hear the agony that there is nowhere to go, that the services we have are just wholly inadequate to meet the challenges we face. Another aspect of this from a policy priority that alarms me as a parent is listening to our police chief speak about the intense increase in fentanyl in our community. At one point in time, he used to find 100, and now it's hundreds of thousands. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Last to speak on this question will be Jeff Manson, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, this is a real problem, and I believe it's a public health problem first and foremost. And I agree with Tyler that a harm reduction approach is the right one to bring. A lot of the mental health, behavioral health, and addiction treatment services are provided at a local level or from nonprofits who contract with local government. But a lot of the funding comes from the state. And the state, again, is not meeting its duty there, but did in this last session increase some funding, but it's just a start. We need more funding. I agree with what both Nicole and Tyler said. I'll specifically speak to our unhoused residents of Seattle who are experiencing substance abuse issues. And I think it's a good time to remind ourselves that housing needs to be the first step. It is almost impossible to take any steps towards substance abuse or mental health recovery without some sort of housing. Even a tiny home, which is just enhanced shelter and not a permanent housing solution, even just having 4 walls and a door that locks is a first step for many people to where they aren't in fight or flight mode 24/7 like when they're on the streets, and they're able to take those first steps towards recovery. But it needs to be a harm reduction approach, and again, it's the state's duty to fund it.
Thanks very much. The fifth and final question for this round will be directed to the following candidates: Julia Reed, Waylon Robert, and Nicole Gomez. And the question is, what can the state do to deal with rising rents? Each candidate will have 90 seconds. The first to speak will be Julia Reed, whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much. I think that it's critical that we think about how we're dealing with rising rents. I'm 35. So many of my friends are living the housing crisis every day. It's not a policy hypothetical to me. It's a real life problem. I think that one of the biggest things the state can do is help to make investments in affordable housing. We talk about billions of dollars for roads and bridges. I think we need to be talking about that level of investment in our human infrastructure as well, especially in our housing. And I also think the state can be making it easier for us to build modest additional forms of housing all across the state. We've done a lot of work on that in Seattle already. I'd like to see other cities step up, because there's research has shown us that the real thing that makes a difference, especially when it comes to homelessness and in our city, it's not, the differentiation is driven not by differences in investment in mental health care, not by differences in investment in substance abuse, but by differences in investment in housing. We've been underinvesting in our housing. We have the fewest number of housing units per household of any state in the nation. We've got to turn that around. Rising rents are high because stock is low and people are struggling to find places to rent.
Thank you. Next candidate to speak on this question will be Waylon Robert, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, this is a huge problem. So I shop at the Ballard Market or Metropolitan Market every day. It's a highlight of my life. And too many of the checkers that I talk to every day are commuting from Snohomish County. And it's really tough because here on the canal, Scott Anderson wanted to invest $10 million in a new boat lift, but couldn't find the 20 people to hire to expand that capacity. So we need more workforce housing here. So a few things I think the state can do. One is subsidizing mom and pop units in our state and subsidizing existing units that are housing people making 50% of our area median income. That's a bill that has gone before the legislature, and I'd be willing to champion it and sponsor it. I think two, it's the state acquiring more existing affordable units in our district, and it's putting more investment in the Housing Trust Fund, which is the primary funder of constructing and preserving affordable housing. And I think too, we need to partner with the city of Seattle in developing land that makes sense. Not every parcel makes sense, but certain parcels can be most effectively utilized for building affordable housing, which is nearby transit and services. We have about 26 underutilized lots around our city, by the way.
Thank you. The last candidate to speak on this question will be Nicole Gomez, whenever you're ready.
Sure, absolutely. So the state can deal with rising rents. I mean, like the other candidates said, affordability is a huge issue. I'm 42 now, but a lot of my friends here are dealing with rent prices that have majorly gone up, especially in the past few years. It's actually one of the reasons why we started looking for a new home way back at the bottom of the market in 2008. I don't think if I didn't purchase then, I would not have a home right now. The thing that I think is important is to also consider things like a rent stabilization program. Oregon recently passed this program, and it could be a smart way to go. There's a bill that was put forth by Representative Macri a couple of sessions ago, and it was essentially talking about this preventing rents from rising over 7% plus inflation annually, and that was it's based off of the consumer price index, and so you can also make it a little stronger because California also has a similar bill, and essentially what that would do would be to like with Oregon, they set a base rate at what it was a year prior to the bill's passage. And I'm sorry, that's what they do there in California. And so it's a way that we could potentially help ease the burden on people who are renting.
Thank you. On to round two. The following two questions will be directed to all 5 of our candidates, each of whom will have 90 seconds to respond. The first of those 2 questions is, what further gun safety or other measures can the legislature take to prevent mass shootings in Washington state? The first candidate to speak on this question will be Tyler Crone, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This is a devastating question. The news broke about the massacre in Texas minutes before I was to walk over to pick up my 3rd grader from co-elementary. What is our state going to do to lead? 1, we are going to ban assault weapons, period, end of story. 2, we are going to roll back immunity for the gun industry as we have done, for example, around opioids. 3, we are going to have licenses in Washington state for you to be able to get a gun. 4, we're going to address this as the public health emergency and crisis that it is, putting the investments in the safety nets and community supports that prevent it in the first place. What are some of those strategies? Those strategies include investing in lower income communities, communities that need supports. When I was an intern way back when in the 1990s, speaking with former members of gangs in Washington Heights and Harlem, they wanted safe schools, they wanted food security, they wanted job training, they wanted opportunities to succeed. That's a way forward. Another key piece of it that I've been listening to and learning about is the importance of investment in mental health. These school shootings are happening by kids. They are happening by teens. And so we have missed the opportunity to find those people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate to speak on this question will be Nicole Gomez, whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I agree with a lot of the points that Tyler made. We absolutely need to do something about this. My kid goes to a school where, and this is something that I don't tell people very often, but they're one of our close friends, my husband's best friend, actually was shot and killed right behind that school. So it actually means a lot to me to be able to work on this issue. Gun safety and gun control is really important to me personally, and I know it's important to my son, who worries about those kinds of things every day because he's been working on those drills since he was essentially in daycare. I think with right now, some of the things that we can do as a state to reduce gun violence are also these mental health workaround or supports that I was talking about earlier, and then also doing things like Tyler mentioned with ending qualified immunity, being able to have a ban on assault rifles, or those types of policies that are out there. Sorry, those type of policies that are out there are things that we can do. They've been proposed before. We're still working on them at the legislative level, and I hope to be able to take part in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next candidate to speak on this issue will be Jeff Manson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been a rough few weeks. I was a senior in high school when the Columbine massacre happened, and I can't believe we're still talking about this 23 years later. I agree with what Tyler and Nicole have said. I mean, first, we just need to ban assault weapons. A few years ago, we raised the age from 18 to 21, but we should just ban them outright. We can do that in Washington state, and we should do that next session. Another thing that we can do is allow cities and counties to impose tougher restrictions than the basic state restrictions. Right now, that's not allowed. A few years ago, Edmonds tried to have a safe storage ordinance But the Supreme Court, our state Supreme Court, overturned that a few weeks ago, saying that it conflicted with state statute. So we need to change that state statute so that Seattle or Edmonds or other cities or counties can impose further restrictions. And I also agree we need to roll back immunity for the gun industry. I think people who manufacture and sell weapons of war should be held accountable for the results of that. And we can't wait. I mean, I wish we didn't have a part-time legislature so we could fix this right now, but we have to wait until January. But this next session has to be the session that we do it.
Thank you. Next candidate to speak will be Julia Reed, whenever you're ready.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, many good ideas already raised. I think that long since the beginning of my campaign, I've been on record saying that weapons of war have no place on our street, and it's long since time for us to have an assault weapons ban. I think like most Americans now, I've been affected by the increasing gun violence in our society. I remember sitting with my dad when he would come home from school after losing yet another student to gun violence. I remember what it's like when I worked on the White House complex to walk in every day, not knowing if this was going to be the day you were going to have to deal with an intruder, with a live shooter on campus. I lost track of the number of lockdown drills and lockdown events we had. Working in government my whole career, every day you walk into the office, you know this could be the day that a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled taxpayer comes in and kills some of your colleagues. And no one should be bearing that kind of burden when they're going to work and going to school. I think, as Jeff said, it's long since time for us to act. I think we need to end state preemption. I think we need to hold the gun industry accountable. I think we also need to think about investing in mental health care. We know that the vast majority of gun deaths in our state and in our country are deaths by suicide. So we have people in moments of despair with easy access to firearms that are allowing them to end their life. We know that's particularly true for women who have access to fire, where there's a gun in the home. They're many more times more likely to end their life that way. As someone who has done a lot of work with is it time? Oh, okay. I will reserve the rest of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final candidate to speak on this issue will be Will and Robert, whenever you're ready.
So when I'm out doorbelling in Magnolia, I go and visit Molly's bench. Molly Conley was a neighbor that was killed by a mentally ill man who just happened to be shooting while her and her friends were walking during a sleepover. So I remember hanging out with Molly and her wonderful sense of humor. And I also remember when we gathered in the Blanchette Gymnasium to honor and remember Molly, which was a life cut short. I think about her brother when I doorbell Magnolia Boulevard in Viewmont and how he's doing. So I think where the state can make a difference here, one is expanding extreme risk protection orders to every county, which enables a loved one or a provider to take away somebody's ability to purchase or possess a firearm. We don't have that in every county. It's just on the state laws, but we need to bring funding and ensure that it is in place. Two, as everyone else has said, it's banning high capacity magazine firearms. And three, we're one of the worst states in the nation for mental health access and resources. And I want to serve on the appropriations or capital budget committee and be a champion with my poker chips on that issue. And so it's something that's on all our minds. 8-year-old yesterday, when I asked them what's important to them, they said their own safety. So I think whoever gets in this seat, we need to lead on this issue.
Thank you very much. Before I move on to our next question, and I do want to just give a hint to our candidates that for these last two questions, we are simply reversing the order. So wink, wink, Will and Robert, you'll be up next. Before we start though, I do want to mention that one of our participants tonight brought up the great suggestion that our candidates could type their campaign websites into the chat. would be helpful for everyone so that we've got that information on the ready. And I appreciate the suggestion. Our final question is well, seeing as we may have a little bit of time, it may not be our final question, so I don't want to make promises, but our next question is directed to all candidates, 90 seconds for response. And the question is, please answer the question that you wish you had been asked. I just wanted to give that a little bit of time. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Waylon Robert.
So
Whenever
is
you're
this
ready.
Is this a make it up as you go question? What do we wish we could have said?
Well, it could be that, or it could be, and I'll mute very soon. It could be that, or it could be a question that was posed this evening. So we'll leave it open for you.
Yeah, what was the education question? I didn't have a chance to answer that.
Of course. The question was, what's your plan for meeting the state's obligation to provide a high quality education for all students?
Yeah, I'll cover that in another issue. So it's, I was walking with Tyler the other day, and too many of our PTAs are responsible for funding the librarian, the art teacher, and really the folks that enrich the education that our kids remember the most, that are our kids' heroes. So I think the state needs to play a bigger role in funding that. I also would like, this is something Marysville Pilchuck High School did when I was working on the workforce development for a CLT mill in Darrington, is having pre-apprenticeships at a high school level. And so I'd like to have pre-apprenticeships to get into the trades at Ballard High School and attach that with funding, as well as investing in the core program. So there's a pipeline into high demand jobs. The average age in our maritime industry working on the docks or on the water is 55 years old. So I think we need to do more investment in our shop classes and for people getting into the trades to support the bedrock of our economy. And it's critical too, just that we invest more in the social workers and mental health resources that can hold your kiddo's hand on a really difficult day. Because I can't tell you how important those folks were and helping me be here today. And it's critical too that our bus drivers have the same benefit parity as our school teachers, because those bus drivers are pretty important. So that comes back to the state's budget.
Thank you. Same open question to Julia Reed whenever you're ready.
Thanks. I think the question I wish I'd been asked today is, what do you think sets I wish each of us had been asked is, what sets us apart from each other? It's a really talented pool. We're really fortunate in the 36. I think what makes me different from my peers who are running, I have the most experience of everyone in the field working in government at every level, at the local level, with the state government, at the national level, at the federal level. And with that experience specifically is workforce experience. And I'm so glad Waylon brought up the importance of workforce development programs in our schools. I think that is a critical pathway for all of us. And I'm the only candidate in the race who has actually created workforce programs, implemented workforce programs at the state level. I think I have also unique lived experience as a woman of color, someone who grew up in Seattle, someone who came back to Seattle as an adult and saw the way that it's changed, not all of it for the better. I think that experience is something, that bridge between old and new Seattle is something that will really benefit the legislature, benefit the 36th district from the person that's in there. And I'm not afraid to speak truth to power. I am someone who says what I means what I say, and you'll always know where I stand. I'm a listener, and I'm someone who I think brings that unique lived experience to the legislature of everyone in our field.
Thank you. Same open question to Jeff Manson whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Yeah, the question I would like to answer is what should be done about climate change. We are seeing the effects of this here in the Pacific Northwest with our smoke season in the summers and the glaciers shrinking on the mountains that surround Seattle. I've been a climate activist since the 4th grade when I co-founded my elementary school's Earth Club after reading a book for kids on the environment. The good news is Washington State is doing more than just about any other state on tackling climate change. The bad news is it's nowhere near close enough. We had a few bills that died this last session that we could bring up next year. We should bring up next year. One is electric vehicle subsidies. Another is improving the building codes to encourage electricity over natural gas. And another is changing the Growth Management Act to include climate effects in comprehensive plans. I'd also just like to talk quickly about my background. I'm an administrative law judge for the state. I've been doing that for 13 years. When I was appointed, I was the youngest judicial officer in the state. And so we adjudicate disputes people have with state government. It includes public assistance, unemployment benefits, Medicaid, child support, child abuse and neglect, childcare licensing, other facility licensing. So I see every day how state laws and state budgets affect people, and we'll be able to bring thousands of stories into the legislature of how an underfunded budget or a turn of phrase in the statute can affect somebody's life.
Thank you. Next candidate to respond will be Nicole Gomez, whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. I think I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about me. That's kind of the question I wish would have been asked. So I'm a mom, an advocate, a community leader, and at age 5, I went from living in a secure house and lifestyle to quickly losing my home due to the illness of a family member. And from that time until this point, I have been learning all I can about policy, politics, and doing the work. There's a huge talent in every single one of the candidates that are here today, and a wide breadth of experience from each and every one of them. And so I'm really proud of being part of this group of individuals. Currently, I am I have a nonprofit organization that works on healthcare policy and pushing for a healthcare transformation, something that's affordable, equitable, and accessible for everyone across the state. I'm currently appointed to the Universal Healthcare Commission by Governor Inslee. It is a commission that I helped to draft and pass and get into state law. It's the first in the nation permanent commission, which I'm very proud of. And I am really looking forward to building the nuts and bolts of a healthcare system for Washington State. It's why I'm running. It's what moves me, and I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, the candidate to speak on this issue will be Tyler Crone, whenever you're ready. You're on mute, Tyler.
I was so fired up, I started talking with mute. Sorry about that. So I have already worn my public health hat in this conversation, and now I'm going to put on my human rights advocacy hat because the stakes are high. And the only reason why I'm in this race is because of those stakes. I am a Yale Law School graduate. I have been on the front lines of critical issues, and these critical issues matter at home. Let me tell you what they are. 1, LGBT equality and inclusion. I need you all to think about kids like mine who are trans, who are trying to find their way, who are being criminalized in state legislatures across this country. I hope you will hold it top of mind and close to heart, because we need to make our society safe, inclusive, and welcoming for them. I hope you will hold close to your chest reproductive rights and justice. Roe v. Wade is going to be rolled back any day now. We are going to lose our majority at a federal level. The Supreme Court does not have our back. And the rumors I'm hearing, the word on the street, is that we are likely to lose our majority in Washington State as well. Reproductive rights, reproductive justice. We need to uphold and ensure abortion is essential health care. The last piece I'm going to put on as a human rights advocate is an issue near and dear to our family. My husband is an immigrant. He's a leader in immigrant justice across our country. We need to ensure that we are welcoming to immigrants in this state as we have been, because when things heat up at the border, they happen here. Thank you all for this chance. I'm so grateful.
Well, unlike our community council meetings, I think that we might wrap this one up on time for once. And I just want to convey a huge thank you to all of our candidates for their time this evening. We know that you were under schedule crunches, and we really appreciate you coming to speak on these issues that are important to our communities. I'd also like to note a special thanks to our organizers, Queen Anne and Magnolia trustees, Josh Daniel, who was our timekeeper, Beth Bunnell, David Kaplan, Sean Champagne, and Janice Traven. Thanks to all of our neighbors who showed up tonight. Go out and vote. We appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
See you soon.
Thank you.